So we're about start time. So first, I just want to read the recognition of Indigenous peoples and land statement. We would like to begin by acknowledging the treaty territory of Anishinaabe, which is defined within the pre-Confederation treaty known as the London Township Treaty of 1796. Throughout time, this region has also become the current home to the Haudenosaunee and Lenape nations. First matter is completion and acceptance of the agenda. I just want to add one discussion item for new matters or whatever we want to call it, and that's going to be committee and board attendance. And I just want to speak about that for a few minutes. All of us together. Hopefully we can come to some understanding on that. Are there any disclosure? And so someone prepared to move the completion of acceptance of the agenda with that addition. Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Kara. All those in favor? That matter is passed. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? I'm not seeing any. So we'll move on to the approval of the previous minutes. They have been circulated. They are the June 15th, 2023 public minutes. So somebody prepared to move those? Moved by Kara, seconded by somebody online, Councilor McAllister. All those in favor? That matter is passed. Next matter is communications. Paul, you have something?
It's part of the CEO report.
All right. Are you going to talk about our presentation to the council during that, or?
I will give an update on that. Yes.
All right. So, okay, great. Because I was going to add that to the agenda from my point of view, but perhaps we can deal with it that way. Delegations, I am not aware of any. I am not aware of any presentations, and I'm not aware of any in-camera items. So the first matter is staff report 2023-43, which is the CEO report. And I will turn things over to you, Paul.
Right. Thank you. And through the chair, just there's a lot of things happening here at LMCH. So just have some items that were shared in the written report and a few things to add supplemental to that. I think first off, just like to acknowledge that we had a staff member pass away this week who'd been with us for about 10 years. And just, I think it just, it's having an impact on both staff and tenants, and just sort of recognize the service of Gerald McCormack for the last 10 plus years, and thank him for his service. And we'll be thinking about his family over the next few weeks. It's very sad for LMCH, and the tenants at 30 Baseline, where he worked, were quite upset for the last few days. He's done a lot for that community, and that's sort of testament to his contribution. Also, there's a LMCH staff barbecue next week, where we'll just take a few hours to recognize each other and sort of celebrate the work we do. And we'll see that in the afternoon of August 23rd. I do believe the board has been invited. So just a reminder, if you are able to attend, that's great. If not, we thank you. And I think the last sort of informal piece is just the update on our annual general meeting was held in June at City Council, where we presented our annual report and took questions from councillors. Some interest in the financial operations of LMCH related to sort of our bad debt and the issue we had last year with overstating our revenues, and sort of some questions on that. A lot of interest in the councillors about just what we're doing to improve community safety and building cleanliness and things like that. You will see those reports in today's package related to our request for multi-year budget. So there's summaries of those, and we can discuss those later in the meeting. But I'm not sure, Phil, you were at the AGM. I'm just wondering if you had any comments to add.
Yeah, I do actually. First of all, and I would be remiss if I didn't say this. Making people who serve as volunteers on boards or even I would suggest members of the public make presentations by a ceiling high plexiglass wall where you're supposed to somehow figure out a way to hold your papers and have a microphone that in my case went up to my nose, and in Paul's case up to, I don't know, about his chest. I feel really strongly about this. I found it really disappointing, demeaning, whatever you want to call it. I think it's great if you want to be secure. I think that's good. I think if you forget that you were elected by the people standing up there, and that they should be treated in a way that's welcoming, I think that's something completely different. So it's important for me to say this, because I don't think I'll go back and stand behind plexiglass to speak to people. I just don't accept that as being appropriate in any way. And so I'm going to leave that. Maybe councillors want to comment at it and disagree with me. I don't really care, because I feel that strongly about it. I felt like maybe a Russian prisoner feels at their show trial, presenting. And so that's how I feel about it. And in the past, people who made delegations and were volunteers were extended the dignity of being able to be down on the council floor, having the use of a lectern and a microphone. We weren't. So I don't accept that in any way as being proper treatment of people who go to council. So that being said, it was what it was. I mean, I tried to get across some points. I'm not sure they were picked up. When staff was speaking about what my major ask was, which was, you know, that we have more flexibility in terms of who we would have as tenants. I don't think staff provided, I didn't want to engage with staff. They said some things that I didn't really understand. They certainly didn't say they recognized that that was an issue and they were going to do something about it. Maybe they are, but that's certainly not the message that was passed to me. A counselor, some of the counselors seemed to want us to ask for money. One talked about issuing a debenture for money. I found that to be amateurish and beneath the basic knowledge level of a city council. So I know that doesn't sound very positive, but I didn't find it to be a positive experience. So that's where I am. The other thing I should tell you is that on at least one occasion, I've been asked by a city councilor to call them to talk about London Middlesex housing, and they haven't even returned my call. So that's discouraging. Others, I have taken the initiative in myself to call them. They have not returned my calls. So I think I've become a little bit skeptical about the connection between city council and this body. So what I just said may get me in trouble, but it's honest. It's what I feel. And that was my impression.
Okay. All right. So few of the other updates I think that are important. So if there's any comments, I don't.
Yeah, do you want to?
Oh, yeah.
Want to address some of that now, so
Well,
that we can, and then the rest of your report, or
Yeah,
go through the rest of your report.
No, I'm not the chair. I didn't see
You can
anything.
respond to me, but it's you don't need to.
No, I actually want to.
Okay, go ahead.
So I think your point to delegations being up in the gallery is very good. I am surprised. I recall being in chambers with you when you were around the Horseshoe, and delegates from London Middlesex Community Housing were on the floor of the chamber. In fact, they stuck a USB drive in a computer down there and showed us a video about how wonderful it was to live in London Middlesex housing. So I think that is an issue that I am happy to deal with our clerks and our staff on. My only ask is that you put that in writing to me in an email so that I can then address it properly with Mr. Schulthus and the clerk staff, because you should be on the floor. And I think that that's applicable to all of our boards, agencies, and commissions, whether it's London Hydro, whether it's you folks. We just had a Civic Works Committee where the London Transit Commission brought forward their annual general report, and Ms. Pleshny was on the floor of the chambers. So it needs to be equal, and all our boards and agencies need to be treated the same and with some level of respect. So absolutely, please send that my way, and I am happy to work on that with you to get that addressed. As much as I do joke about you belonging in a penalty box, I understand why that feeling was not that was not a great place to be to make that presentation. So,
But Deputy Mayor, I don't think the members of the public should be behind plexiglass either.
well, that is a different discussion.
Well, I'm gonna put both in.
That's fine. I will be addressing the board's, agencies, and commissions piece. Specifically because I think that is one that can and should be solved relatively quickly. I will also agree that, and I would encourage you to put this, include this as well. I agree that this suggesting that we should issue a debenture. Why weren't you there with a budget ask? This is an annual general meeting update to council. This is not a multi-year budget forum. I think Councillor Pelosa addressed that at one point, but I think that statement that you made about, frankly, the lack of adequate level of understanding from councillors needs to be addressed, and this is not the only board that has experienced something like that from a member of council. So I would actually very much appreciate it if you did communicate that formally to me so that we can tackle it. I will say, I think that particularly the ask about the tenant placement agreement piece was heard very clearly, and that I think you can expect to see a staff report coming back in September or October from Mr. Dickens and Mr. Cooper with regard to the tenant selection process moving forward and the criteria that are being used right now versus what is a more appropriate criteria. And I think that the message that both Phil and Paul delivered that night around that particular issue was well received by the majority of council. I don't claim to speak for all of council, but I think that the majority of council heard what you were saying very clearly. And there has been some ongoing discussions with staff about getting that tenant selection process updated sooner than later. The fact that it has not been updated since 2003 is a problem. And that has been acknowledged by senior leadership to me, and I think to other members of council. So I just wanted to share that perspective. You might not have felt that it was heard in the moment, but it was. At least that's my takeaway. So I'll leave that's sort of my comments. I'm happy to work with you to address some of this stuff. I think you raised some very valid concerns about both behavior of members of council and the accommodation of our boards and agencies coming and providing us presentations and having to stand up in the gallery behind plexiglass, not having the ability to share anything with us from the floor, having the lectern, having the ability to screen share, provide a presentation via PowerPoint if you wanted any of that sort of stuff. This COVID hangover that we're seeing in terms of who's allowed on the floor needs to come to an end. So I will end my comments there and just say I'll be working with you on that, Phil.
Thank you. That's it.
You're ready, Chair?
Yeah, he's got his hand up.
Okay.
Thank you, and I do, through the chair, I do appreciate, the comments. I mean, I feel like, I'm in a hockey arena watching a game sometimes when people go to the mic, so I can hear what you're saying on that, Phil. I don't love how that feels. I can understand, that's off-putting, and you want to feel welcome, and I totally get that. I just wanted to comment further to what Deputy Mayor said in terms of our advocacy efforts. And I think I speak for the deputy mayor as well, that, every chance we get, we have pushed in terms of the tenant selection. I'm sure Kevin is sick of hearing it from us. So I just want to reiterate, we are trying to push, what we've discussed at the board level to our city staff. So those efforts are ongoing. They, every chance we get, we are pushing that. We're trying to be the bridge between City Hall and housing. Some counselors, I think they're still going to just take every opportunity to take a shot. I encourage them to reach out, but that's their prerogative. But I do think that, we have an open door policy, open communication, and it's up to them whether they take it or not. But I think that on our part, we're open to listening to them, to listening to you, and passing along what we hear and advocating on your behalf.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for having a heart and having the courage to speak up about things like this. I think I remember times in my life being on social assistance behind glass, and I could go to the bank and cash my welfare check there, but I couldn't pick up my welfare check without being behind bulletproof glass, and it does dehumanize you. And I think it really is important that we give people some dignity and respect. And normally the way we treat people impacts the way they respond in most cases. And so I think, I just really appreciate you and your heart. And thank you for bringing that forward today.
Anything else? Okay, so we need a mover and seconder for Paul's report.
Actually, like just a few more
Oh, you got
updates.
more?
Yes. I was just getting going. So as I said, there is a lot going on. So rookie ball season just flagged that that's run by the London Police Service, and we support them fully and have for 30 years, the 30th anniversary of rookie ball. One down this year, the winning team was the South Paws, representing Southdale and Pond Mills community. So it's pretty exciting. Big event, a lot of kids really excited, and we saw Damian Warner come and do a quick motivational piece with the kids. So it's sort of nice to see that, and just sort of see the positive energy in the kids and the excitement of the kids, and a lot of volunteers from London Police, as well as just the community members that were sort of supporting there. So just recognize that important thing, had its milestone 30th anniversary, and that's the type of work that we want to see more of as we move forward. The other thing that is of interest is the tenant director recruitment update. In the report, I think I mentioned the applications were received. We had 16 applications, and they were reviewed by the subcommittee, and we're getting ready to do interviews. So we have a number of candidates we're going to interview. So it's really exciting. I think new this year, in addition to doing the interviews, we also did a virtual town hall to tell people what it's like to be on the board of directors or what's expected of them, just to give some folks some ideas. So good engagement with that. So just trying to get the word out to the community. So we saw a whole bunch of new applicants this year. So we'll see what that process does. Two other updates. I've attached a report that was to be received by City Council or a City of London committee. It was received last night to the Community and Protective Services Committee. So the city is going to take over a nonprofit housing provider with 64 units. The current board is going to walk away from the property. And the report provides a lot of details on why that's happening, and then the structure and the legislation. The important takeaway for us as London Middlesex Community Housing is there's a request. There's really two requests coming from the city. One is that LMCH staff assume property management services for this site. And we've had a number of conversations and did a site visit to walk through that. And that's an ongoing process of discovery. The second request came today, where the request is that directors on the LMCH board be appointed to as directors for this other corporation that we're assuming responsibility for. So that's still being worked out, but that's something that the city expects to ask. That this board would nominate likely 3 directors to sit on that board to just manage the governance piece of that. It would still be a governance board. So that would require action from this board. And I think as we look at moving forward, it may be worth just sort of discussing that. We don't have many details. I guess from my perspective, there's key anchor points in that LMCH must be sort of made whole. Can't use our existing funding to cover any of this work, so we need to be reimbursed fully for any work we do. That, you know, there is some unknowns with this, so the liability and uncertainty that of the transfer of the asset, the capital repair deficit, and any as-is conditions, you know, there has to be an acceptance. The city assumes those liabilities, and they don't get transferred to LMCH as a corporation or us as an organization. And I think those are the sort of the 2 real big anchor pieces. And then I guess just understanding the appetite of the board to assume those responsibilities, and if so, what process would we want to put in place to identify those directors. That was an unexpected kind of development today, so I'm just sort of bringing the board up to date on that. And I think just the other thing that we should be requesting is an extension. They're looking to push this. The board that's there wants to drop this as September 1st. That's not reasonable based on sort of the timing of council, which is August 30th, and all the work that needs to be done. So a 30 to 60 day extension would benefit but the city, but primarily London Middlesex community housing, so we can get up to speed. And then the issue of, you know, is it the role of this board to appoint other directors for another board? I don't know where the board's position on that is.
So is there some action, because something came out, is there some action we need tonight? Or no, are you just providing an update and then it's gonna?
Well, I guess I'm thinking through, with this new request, I do believe the action that is required would be that to ensure that the chair has authority to appoint directors to this corporation. That's the key kind of, because that's not consistent, you know, I don't think it's anticipated in our shareholder direction where, you know, it's anticipated that you'll appoint members to subcommittees, but this is not a subcommittee of the board. So I think should we choose to move the board be okay with that direction of creating or assigning members to that other board, I think we need a process to identify those members so that we don't have to wait till the next board meeting at the end of September, especially if the transfer is going to be maybe October.
But 1st. Just, I don't understand. Are you saying that somehow we are going to appoint members to another board, a board that operates separately and makes decisions? See, I don't understand how you do that. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying.
We're board members of London Middlesex Community Housing.
Yeah.
I could see it if that entity was now part of our portfolio, but if it's not, how do we?
Well, the building will be part of our portfolio. The thing that's not yet clear, I think, in this process is what are the legal requirements related to managing that corporation, and they're sort of working through those issues now. I think in anticipation that the legal opinion is that the LMCH directors can sit on this other board, and it's a reasonable request of the shareholder that we should be prepared to appoint directors to that. You know, if the City of London comes back with legal opinion that that's not, as you say, this doesn't seem correct, then that motion wouldn't have effect. But I guess I'm just thinking forward, if this is the path we're taking and it is the legal opinion that this is something that the city can ask of the directors and of the board, then we want to be prepared to act on that without another board.
Yeah, I just find it strange that the city would say to members of this board, we've decided we'd like you to sit on another board for another housing entity. And run it.
So I think where the other housing provider is part of a corporation for the sole purpose of managing that housing provider.
Mhm.
They're trying to minimize the complications because there's still a mortgage, there's land ownership, there's lots of things associated with that corporation. So I think that's what's they're working through right now. So, you know, I don't have the definitive answer
Okay.
of, is
So,
this
yeah, one last
lawful?
question to clarify. So with the LMCH, like, let's say a board member from here goes and sits on that corporation. So now they're sitting on a corporation's board. Are there other people on that board?
No, it would be just the
Three-
members appointed from the LMCH board. And they would not manage through the LMCH board. They would manage the business of that corporation just separately.
See, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor, maybe you can help.
Well, I'm gonna try. I don't understand it all yet myself either, but I did have a conversation with Matt Felberg. And I'll kind of frame it in terms of what we went through prior on council, Phil, in terms of dissolving the former LMCH board and temporarily putting civic administration in board positions. And then and the same as we did with dissolving the HDC and putting staff in charge. So essentially, there is no staff capacity right now for them to act as an interim board of directors. So the idea was London Middlesex Housing Board members already have an idea of how not-for-profit rent-geared income housing operations work. Can we ask the board members to, and although it's not a subcommittee of this board, but essentially would the board member, it would function like this board being a subcommittee, 3 members of this board being a subcommittee that just deals with this other organization's property in a short meeting once a month, so that we can meet the statutory requirements for receiving reports, receiving financials, those kind of things. In the short term, until we figure out a long-term plan. It's an interim request. It's not at this point, at least not a permanent suggestion that this property be folded into our portfolio as an asset in the long term. I would be curious what, especially if Paul's done a site visit, what his thoughts are about, and these would be a longer conversation for another day, but would there be actually interest in simply folding the property asset into our assets permanently, the city transferring it to LMCH? What that looks like, I don't know, but I know that right now basically it comes down to there are 65 units that are going to be without a board and without RGI housing if we don't find some sort of stopgap measure. And the thought was that the people around this table need to be brought up to speed nearly as much as going out to find somebody outside who maybe has less or no experience with not-for-profit housing. So this is all very new to me too. It was a quick 10-minute conversation. So I'm trying to figure out what all the T's crossed and I's dotted would look like moving forward too. But there is an urgency in the fact that this not-for-profit housing provider is essentially dissolving and somebody's got to run the property. I fully agree with Paul. This has to be completely revenue neutral for LMCH. This cannot be a cost on our books. And we have to make sure that in terms of the property management side, we're actually able to manage the properties, that we have sufficient staffing and capacity to deal with any issues there. I did note in the report that this agency has received a fair amount of capital grant funding to make improvements in their properties in the last couple of years. So I don't know if Paul's got thoughts about what the physical state of the site looks like. Because my concern would be, how much are we signing up for? Like, are we signing up for a giant headache, or are we signing up to sort of be caretakers in the short term? And yes, the city solicitor still needs to provide an opinion on whether or not they can actually delegate this authority away from civic administration and to LMCH to then delegate authority to a subgroup of the board of directors.
So I guess through the chair, just We have had the site visit. We sort of had a few conversations over the last few weeks with the city just to figure out where they're going and what they're looking for. So this site, is at risk of sort of being lost to affordable housing if they don't start taking the right path and they move to a receivership model and just sort of divest it. So they're interested in preserving it. It is a site that essentially I think it's built in 1964. It has some old school construction that doesn't lend itself for retrofit. It would really lend itself for a redevelopment site in the long term. And there is, the things we would look for that would sort of give us indicators of what the challenges on site have been done, the building condition audit, and, certain investigative kind of on the asset itself. So there's disclosure on all those items. So I think, the intent is they need to get this site through its mortgage, which expires at the end of 2024, before it can take any action on what the middle term kind of redevelopment thing is. So their ask is for us to do the property management, so the affordable housing is retained, and that they have somebody they can work with a little bit of the knowledge in property management, capital improvement, to sort of get the site back to where it needs to be with compliance and livability, and then help them with what a redevelopment roadmap would look like and help them inform that decision. So, I don't, one of the possible outcomes is that it folds into the LMCH portfolio, but we don't have the information of whether that's a good idea for us or the city at this point. But we do know we want to help them keep the affordable housing.
Yeah, I guess my impression is this. First, I mean, I have two, maybe I'm overly touchy tonight, but I would have thought if the city wanted the board members to sit on another board, they might ask the board. Like, it just seems strange to me that they're saying, oh, LMCH board members, we'd like you to go sit on this other board and do more work. It's kind of strange that they wouldn't ask us.
Well, I think this is their sort of way of asking
It's
through the board, versus individual
Okay.
outreach.
So
Sort of
second, we do have a board here, and I think we have to be really aware that that courtesy should be extended to the board. If you're going to say, hey, board members, we want you to take on more work, somebody should explain in a fulsome way what that entails. Like, I don't know if I want to go sit on a board. Like, I'm looking at it saying the current board quit because they can't manage it. So is there someone, like, I don't know who wants to sit on. So now next week I'm sitting on this board for what is legally a separate entity. And I go to a meeting and people say, hey, board, we're in a mess here. And my colleagues are probably going, I didn't sign up for this. And so I find it a little bit, I don't know, that's just strange to me. And from a legal point of view, I was under the impression this was going to be folded into London Middlesex Community Housing. And then we were going to have it part of our portfolio. But right now it seems like the city's saying, hey, you guys have experience. So as individuals, take more time out of your lives to sit on a board for something that's failing. So I don't, and I want someone else to talk because I'm being a jerk tonight. But I mean, I have reservations.
Is the city willing to give us consulting fees?
Yeah,
John.
as directors. Yeah. So, I think the challenge is that this is sort of evolving as they do the discovery. So, it wasn't really coming clear until this week that this is a corporation moving that needs directors versus a property that needed management. So I think it's sort of evolving at the city level. And I think that's the purpose of the request for more time, because every time they think they know what's happening, there's another layer of questions. So in our conversation today with the city, we had a whole bunch of other questions and related to things like, risk and liability and those types of things that are transferring with the corporation and making sure they don't transfer to LMCH, and how do we get insight into that. So, I will say that the shareholder direction does anticipate that our role is to own and operate affordable housing. I think that's the purpose of the corporation. This is a little out of the ordinary in that this corporation, we then indirectly managing another corporation. And, you know, I guess the purpose is to sort of raise this for information, and this new information that's not in the report I shared. We need to process and determine how we want to move forward. You know, one is an organization. What is our operational capacity to deliver on property management services? And I guess we're asking the board to think about what are the questions
Okay,
you have, what are those
Sorry, do
things?
we have to decide this tonight? Because I'm not comfortable saying I'm gonna go sit on another board. I don't know about my call. And the other thing is, you know, we're gonna talk about quorum later and I mean, it's not gonna be one of the elected officials who sits on this board, right? They have enough things to do and they do a very good job of coming to this board. They support us. And by the way, despite what I said, we get fantastic support from our elected officials who are board members of this board. I mean, I don't know if my colleagues who are here are prepared to just jump tonight and say, I'll join another board of an entity that's different from London Middlesex Community Housing. And I would have appreciated having a discussion with somebody from the City of London about this ask. We are a board, like we're not like the one thing that I will always stick up for is the board. And I don't think people at City Hall should say, well, we want your board to do something and tell them that. Like that's not how you do things. And I feel really strongly about that. So anyways, John, go ahead. Sorry, I'm doing all the talking and
No, that's okay. I might have put you behind glass if you don't.
I should be behind glass.
No, I'm just joking around. I love your
That's okay.
passion. I really
No,
do.
that's okay.
I think maybe we can invite whoever is going to help with the transition, if we do agree to do that, someone that can give a little more context and have a bit of a conversation, I think would be helpful for all of us to be a little more informed before we make any kind of commitment to that. I don't like to commit to things until I know I can actively take part in them, and that's my thoughts on the matter anyways.
Deputy Mayor.
So I have a suggestion then, that the board move to request Paul to reach out to Matt Felberg and arrange an information meeting, whether that's by Teams or whatever, whatever that works for people, for the members of this board to provide a better understanding of what is being asked, and that this would be to be scheduled before the next LMCH board meeting. And I think that given, and sorry, Melissa, I'm not writing a great motion here, but doing it on the fly. So I think that would be the motion, and I think that we would have sort of it being noted that this is not an official meeting of the LMCH board, that it doesn't require quorum, and that board members can attend voluntarily. Like if you're not interested, don't feel that you need to attend. But if you feel like you might be willing to at least hear what the city is asking, then attend, get some more information, and find out whether you'd be comfortable doing that. That would be my sort of suggestion in terms of, let's ask Paul to set up a meeting with Mr. Felberg. He can make a presentation. Those board members who are able to attend can hear it, and then we can come back to the next board meeting and provide a more fulsome direction.
Do you want to move that?
I'm moving that gobbledygook that I just
No, I understand what you're saying. I
dictated,
think,
that hopefully Melissa captured something that makes sense in terms of emotion.
all right, do we have a seconder for that? Mr. Corby, go ahead.
It's Mr. Corboy, my friend, but that's okay. I'll
Corboy,
let it
sorry.
slide. Yes, I second that. That's all. I'm just seconding the motion. Thank you.
And just discussion on the motion. Yeah, my point, I think that's a good idea. I think to come to us tonight and say, agree to go on a board is just, that's too much. So I'm in favor of it. So we'll call the vote. All in favor? Great, thank you. Do you need anything else on that issue?
On that issue related to this property
Yeah,
management?
yeah.
No, I think that's the sort of the fresh contentious part of this, I think. You know, from the LMCH perspective on the property management services. We do provide property management services at 122 baseline. We'll be providing property management services at 345 Sylvan Street, which is another City of London build. So we actually, you know, from a property management perspective, it helps us to get to this number to give us 3 sites so we can actually separate staff this, which is something that will actually alleviate some of the burden we're feeling across the organization. So from the organizational capacity perspective in the short term, this is something we support because it gives us that ability to actually hire a different staffing team to sort of manage the 3 sites.
That makes a lot of
So
sense.
it just sort of, it gets us to the critical mass we need to
Yeah.
do that.
All right, perfect.
That's helpful.
That is very helpful to know that. To know that from a staff point of view, you view this as something that you
Yeah.
can A, manage and B, is positive.
Yeah, and there's,
Okay.
you know, there's lots of, you know, the ramp up for 340 for Sylvan Street is going to be in early 2024. So this sort of the timing of bringing this one on and then bringing another one on will really will
Okay.
provide a benefit to us. So operationally, there is some positive impacts for doing this type of work. So just sharing that.
Okay.
And I think just yeah, I think that's for the CEO update.
Thanks.
Is-
And I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just think the director issue is really important.
Yeah.
That we deal with it properly. So we need a mover and seconder to receive Paul's report. Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Councillor McAllister. All in favor? Thank you. Next report is staff report 2023-44, which is the vacancy management update report.
Turn that through the chair. I'll turn that over to Ms. McKenzie and Ms. Poirier.
So, thank you through the chair. I will just briefly identify that the numbers that you're seeing on this vacancy report are a little bit higher than we anticipated. We are still seeing some really good work from the tenant placement team. They've been able to stay on top of the offering and letting of units, but we've had some challenges on the restoration side, which will allow me to sort of transition that over to Christine. That's sort of her area is the restoration, and she's got a bit more of a detailed explanation and some plans for the rest of the month to sort of get us back on target. Turn that over to Christine.
Any questions, comments about the?
I think Christine's going to.
Oh, I'm sorry, Christine,
Great.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. My apologies. I just jumped on the gun. Go ahead.
Thank you. And through the chair, as of the end of July, we had 105 units in active restoration, which is down from December of 2022 at 126 units. 6 of these units were awarded to CMHC for accessibility, bringing the total down to 99 units in active restoration. A part of this number, we have 13 units that are currently in the debris removal, pest control, and scoping, vendor scoping process, which is 13% of that number. 58 of these units are currently sitting with vendors in the restoration process, which is 59% of that number. 28 of these units are in the final stages with the maintenance and repair staff, which is the 28% of that number. Breaking it down to a question that was asked previously by John, the number of units in the senior buildings. We have 24 units or 24% from our seniors. 52 units or 53% is sitting in our adults buildings. And 23 of these units or 23% is other family space. The average days in restoration, the average, We are down from December. We had 116 days in December. We are 109 days now in July. And the average age of units in Rusto are down from December at 97. We are 80 in July. Speaking to the 91 plus days in Rusto, again, in December, we were at 48 units. We are now 23 in July. And speaking to the 21 to 90 days in Rusto, we are down from December at 26 units to 15 in July. We have 23 units that were restored in July, which is a lot lower than the number that I had mentioned previously that I hope to acquire. And a big factor to this were the 2 unexpected fire incidents that we did have. One being at 122 baseline, where 7 units were affected. That's been sitting 76 days now in restoration. And then in July, on July 11th, we had the second fire at 241 Simcoe, where 18 units were affected. 9 units were occupied, and thankfully those tenants were able to stay home. We were able to do the restoration with them home, and the other 9 units have been rehoused at our other sites from units that were ready in the vacancy inventory, and they've now entered into restoration through this process as well. So that's sitting now at 37 days in restoration.
That's great. Thank you. Questions, comments from board? Mr. Corboy. Go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Chair. First, just thank you to Andrew and Christine. You know, I just appreciate the work on this portfolio in particular. For the division of units where you're looking at the percentages, you know, in the senior units and individual, do we know, like, is there a way to divert resources to a certain area that where they maybe wouldn't take as long to get ready? Like, are we thinking in that? I know that maybe that's coming up later on, but I'm just wondering if there's a plan in place to divert resources to the areas where we can get the restorations done a little bit quicker to move that along. And then I also wondered, when I'm looking at this, I'm just wondering if I'm reading this correctly. It says 133 units are currently available. Does that mean there are 133 units ready to be moved into that are sitting empty right now?
Through the chair, I'll answer the first question, the latter question, John, with regard to the 133 units. That's a combination of the units that my team, the tenants placement staff have, along with the vacant units that are to be restored. That's the total vacancy number for everything. So we only had, I believe it was a total of 20 odd units. It was 0.9% of the rental stock that was sitting with tenant placement for offering and renting out. So it was below our 1% target. The rest are under restoration.
Okay, and so for that, Andrea, the ones that are sitting with the, you know, the committee that's doing that, is that, you know, various reasons, like you're waiting for a response from somebody, you're trying to connect with people and to offer them the unit and whatnot?
It can be. So in the month of July, we rented or we future leased approximately 50 units total. So some of it is timing, John. It might be that we've offered somebody that's on Ontario Works, they need to wait till the end of the month till they get the check, so they can give us first and last month's rent. In some instances, you know, we had one unit that sat for an extended amount of time. It was a bachelor unit at one of our sites, so that's one of the less desirable. It had been offered a total of 10 times. So just the amount of time it takes to contact somebody, to set up an appointment, to go and show the unit, give them a couple of days, because each time you make an offer, you've got to wait another 48 hours for them to either accept or decline. So that can sometimes slow down the process. They are still doing fairly well. I think their days to commit now for units in July is 21. for all of the vacants. So they're staying fairly well on top of those, and same thing is happening this month. But there are individual challenges from time to time with units at times, and I'm talking a lot, sorry. At times, we also have an applicant that will accept a unit, and then for whatever reason, we hold that unit for them for a month, and then they withdraw their acceptance of that. So that goes back on the books. That looks like we've done nothing with it for another month, right? So each of those pieces sort of add to the timelines. But for sure, like the tenant placement team is always well on top of their targets, and do a pretty stand-up job of getting the units out the door as soon as we can.
Thanks, Andrea. I guess on that, I'm hoping then we're keeping stats on those, like the ones that maybe, withdraw at the end, so that it is recognized and kept track of somewhere. And then it sounds like there's a bit of a process issue with the system, like a systemic barrier, like maybe the City of London, and instead of having people wait until the end of the month when they physically have that money, maybe there's a way to sign an agreement with social services to allow them to move into that unit sooner, rather than waiting until the end of the month. I wonder if that's maybe something we can talk to Kevin Dickens about, like an internal process within Ontario Works, at least at the municipal level. And I can connect with some people at ODSP as well to see about some options at the provincial level, if that's something that you think might be helpful in, eliminating that barrier.
Through the chair, I'll take a deeper look, John, and maybe I can potentially connect with you separately. And some of the challenge too that we see is just that people have to give 60 days notice if they're coming in to our units, right? So that sometimes will delay, right? They've got to give an existing landlord their 60-day notice. So that impacts it as well. It's not always just about needing to wait for the money at the end of the month. That certainly is a piece of it though, for sure.
Yeah, I know there's always going to be multiple issues. I'm just hoping, like, if there are little ones we can catch along the way and take care of, it helps in some way. I know it's progress, at least in my mind. That's the way I look at it. So I appreciate all the perspective on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? I guess
Just about the diversion of resources to focus on the units that are quicker to restore. Are we planning or moving in that direction?
Yes, and through the chair, we do have a new vendor pool on board now that has capability and capacity to be able to finish these units in a more timely manner. Our main focus right now is to complete the ones that are 90 days in vacancy. They shouldn't have been sitting that long. So that's how we focused it right now, is to complete the ones that have been sitting the longest, and then go from there.
So thank you for that. But my concern with that is, say there's units in 90 days that are going to take 4 months to restore. Say it's going to take 4 months, just hypothetically, to restore one unit in the 90-day plus, but we can restore 5 units that have only been vacant for 30 days. I would much rather the resources be spent on restoring those 5 units. So the quantity of units is a family, a person, a human being that doesn't have to be without housing. So in my mind, that's kind of where I'm thinking with the strategy. It's just focusing the energy to be as efficient as possible. And to me, that's kind of how I envision it, hypothetically anyways.
Any response on that? There's more of a comment. I don't think John was, or he was looking for a response. So is there someone else on the board that would like? Oh, John. I just want to say, like, I feel like, I'm interrogating people. That's not what I'm trying to do. No.
I'm trying to throw ideas out, and I don't want anyone to feel like it's not yeah. Thank you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's just, I'm trying to just move. It's hard to tell when we're going to move on to another person. So I just want to make sure you had your opportunity to make those comments, and they're all fine. Does anyone else on the board have some questions or comments? Yeah, I just have, so this fire that happened, and is that the fire I think that we heard about? Can you tell me what in terms of units, how many units did that sort of eliminate or create the need for restoration?
Chair, so initially we had anticipated it was going to just be a couple of units on that floor that were going to be impacted. So in the original email that I'd sent out, it was that floor because we had to do some air cleaning and then cleaning up of the smoke. But as we got into the building later in the week, it was discovered that there was water damage throughout the units below. So the unit that where the fire originated was on the 10th floor. So we got in with unit restoration throughout the week, and it was all of the units below that were impacted. So it was a total of 17 units altogether. I think is what it was, right? 17 units. We were able to put a few up with supports from the Red Cross for a few days. That extended a little bit longer than anticipated. And then anybody else that was in those units below, we have relocated now and signed new leases, but it was a significant impact on the building.
And would it be fair to say that, I mean, that must have had an influence on that 4.1% vacancy in July? Am I right about that, or am I missing?
Well, through the chair, I think that's part of what Christine was talking about with their ability to get as many units done in the restoration process. Because we needed to divert the staff, right, to be dealing with a whole bunch of other issues associated with the fire there, and then also the one that we had experienced in June at 122 baseline.
All right.
Okay, that's just it caused us to have to redeploy staff.
Great. That was all that I want to ask. And my final is just a general question. So we keep working through these numbers every month and look at them, and we have this target of 3%. And I think I've asked almost every month, is that does that remain something that we're going to hit and maintain? Because it seems to me that staff's doing everything they can, but the nature of what we're being faced with, which is things like fires, et cetera, are creating circumstances that just make it so difficult. So I don't know if anyone can help me with that.
I think through the chair, it's a fair comment because, one of the challenges you run into, in this summer, it's, in the summer period and over December, you have planned absences with people taking holidays. You have unexpected things like fires or floods, or you have injuries, or you have things like that sort of impact that. I guess what we need to sort through, and this sort of the push, and that's why the push on the aged vacancies, is we have this carryover effect, and we don't know the size of that. So whether it's like right now about 30 units that should have been turned if our process was tighter. So, I think 3% is a fair target, but it may need to be adjusted a little bit. The two things I want to get at by sort of into Q3 or Q4 of this year is, what is the revised target? What's the target days we're doing? Because, the challenge was we weren't getting things to vendors. I think to John's point, we were trying to do all the work ourselves, and we take these really big job units and try to work through them ourselves. And those are going to vendors now, right? So that way you can put 5 vendor teams out versus all your MRs. So we're trying to work smarter through that. We're just dealing with that backlog piece of those aged units. And that's the critical thing that Christine and her team need to work through over the next 3 months. And so the number for me is that the 50 some odd units that are currently with vendors, right? So what you see is we're dealing with 13 units that we're going to get started. We got 58 already assigned to vendors, and we have 24 units that are back to us that we have a short piece of work to do just to get them ready. So for me, that tells me the units are going through the process and those delays are being eliminated. So once we do that for 2 or 3 cycles, we'll know what the number should be. And I will say that in July, a lot because of the fire as well as just life, we had way more vacancies come up in July than we had previously. The number was 50 some odd, 53, and we usually have 31 or 32. So there's another blip of random add 20 that's going to show up in the August numbers. But if we get 2 to 3 cycles of getting things to vendors in a timely manner, it takes probably, we can expect the cycle to be between 5 and 9 weeks to do a unit turnover, 5 being the short side because we have debris and pest control. There's at least 2 weeks. Work in the unit is at 1 to 2 to 3 or higher weeks. And then the MR work, by the time we get it and sort of get that signed in, is usually a week to 2 weeks as well. So 5 weeks is probably the low end of the target, with up to 9 to 10 weeks for our larger units and family sites. You know, they have to put those, there's more work to do, but we put larger vendor teams on that. So
I guess it's just from my past experience when, you know, people somewhere start getting excited that we're not hitting a number. You send a consultant in and the consultant says, these people aren't hitting their numbers, get rid of them.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I worry about that because I think you do know what you're doing. But I guess we get to a point where are we going to talk about that number and say, look, 3% is just really hard to hit, and here's a bunch of reasons, so that it makes some sense, rather than saying we're going to get that number. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. I think the 3% is a reasonable number. We do, from my perspective.
Okay.
Once we deal with that 30 to 40 units
Okay.
that have been sitting at the 60 to over days, those shouldn't be there. So if we get the capacity to reduce those, then we can manage 36 units on an ongoing basis consistently. And if we do that, that is more than our normal turn annually. So if you look at our year to date, we're returning more units this year to date than we did in past years. And, you know, so we were catching up. We had the summer months that sort of we've got to recover from, but we have been consistently turning 36 units. And if we do that, then that's 400 vacancies a year. And we haven't had historically 400 vacancies a year.
Okay.
So we're building the ability to address the backlog as well as the capacity to deliver on 36 units a month. So I think that's where I have the confidence that just for the timeline, you know, we had a good plan at the end of May. And then we had June fire and we had a July fire, and we're off track again.
Okay.
So I think, you know, that 36 a month is critical. And I've mentioned that before, and now we're getting rid of the backlog.
Okay.
So
John, you had
Final comment, I promise. I just want to say, maybe these reports need to include stats to give us that context. Fire, flood, assigned a vendor, what long-term repairs required, whatever. Then it doesn't seem like nothing's being done or there's no progress. So I think it'd be easier to gauge progress, identify areas we should focus resources and shifting things around. I think it'll help kind of everyone if we do that. And I think it's important we do, because there isn't that context. And I don't even really care about a percentage, rather than just understanding exactly what's going on, understanding the root causes and knowing we're moving in a direction. And it's difficult to see that. It's not that I think there's not the effort going into it. It's just, it's difficult to see the progress because the report itself doesn't really define the contextual stuff behind it all.
Thank you. All right, so I think we've sort of gone through a lot on that. Thank you very much, and thanks to both of you for the reports. As I say, just from my point of view, don't think it's staff not knowing what needs to be done. I think it's the challenges of what we're presented with. That's my view in any event. So I think the worst thing you can do is say, hit that number, and I don't care how you do it. It just makes sense to me. So we need a mover and seconder to receive the report. John is going to move it. Kara's going to second it. Any further conversation? All those in favor? That is passed. So the next reports are the Finance Committee reports for information. Shelley was not able to make it tonight. She gave us plenty of notice of that. I understand there was a fulsome Finance Committee meeting. So the first three reports, which are the reports for information, FC 2335, FC 2340, and FC 2341. Why don't we just see if, Paul, do you have anything you want to, as a prelude to that, before I ask if the board has any questions?
Well, I think just, I won't review the reports. I'm happy to take any questions on them. I just will acknowledge the work of Diana Taplash-Billy. You know, she's moved on from London Middlesex Community Housing. I think she's done a great job in sort of preparing and sort of building back the confidence of the finance function and the structures and the reporting that's required. And I just thank her for that service. And I know we benefited just having the confidence in these numbers and the reports coming from there. And I just thank her for her service and wish her well. And I just prepared to answer any questions that folks have from the content of the reports.
All right, thank you very much. So we would have had a chance to review those. They went out. Any questions or comments? John's got a heart.
That was for Diana.
I'm gonna ask you to
That was
explain
for
the heart.
Diana. That was for
okay.
Diana. Yeah.
Okay, any questions or comments about the reports? We'll just move them as a package. Mover, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councilor McAllister. Just before we vote on it, I had a chance to speak to Diana before she left. I think Diana did a tremendous job and I really enjoyed working with her. We are sorry to see her go. Surprisingly, she moved to she's working now in Strathroy. So I'm somehow going to blame Mayor Grantham for what's happened here.
Totally fallen fault.
He's stealing people from London and taking the Strathroy. So I will take that up with him as we move forward. So all those in favor? Thank you very much. The Finance Committee reports for approval are in separate. We'll do those separately. Staff report 2023-45, which is multi-year operating and capital budget. Paul, any comments? I understand there was some discussion about that at the committee, so I don't know if you have anything further before we have a discussion about that.
Yeah, no, I just through the chair, just acknowledge the conversation of the Finance Committee. It was very helpful in sort of recasting and just sort of going back to the numbers and trying to find, making sure that any increases were consistent with sort of our projections and just sort of look for opportunities to sort of smooth over some of the changes we saw happening in some of the budgets. So we've recasted the budget to reflect that based on that direction. So what you have before you is the revision, the revised numbers. And, we are asking for increases through the multi-year budget with some increases in 2024 that are jumping some costs that we see increasing. Natural gas is one. We have some fixed price contracts for about 50% of our natural gas costs. And those are going to take a significant jump based on just the new signings of our current environment. We benefited from low costs for a number of years. Community safety costs have increased and we expect ongoing increases in insurance. So those are the sort of three areas where we've identified for significant increases in the multi-year budget, and the rest is looking at inflationary costs where we know we have that pressure, but trying to just make sure we work conservatively and make sure we're not over asking for funds. So.
All right. So with your comments, are they just on 2023-45 or also 46?
Just on 45.
Just on 45.
Just
All
on
right,
45.
let's open that up for any questions from the board. There being none, then we'll just need a mover and a seconder. So we're prepared to move it. Hera is moving it, seconded by Councilor McAllister. Anything further? All those in favor? That matter is passed. We'll now go to staff report 2023.46, which is a multi-year budget request. Paul, do you have any comments on that?
Yes, through the chair, similar comments to the previous report. We did have a very fulsome conversation at the Finance Committee on this. And again, just the conversation was to recast our request, to think about timing of when we can actually implement what we're asking for. So, to make sure that we got the resources we need, but didn't front load the cost and sort of then not utilize the funds. So we've made some changes to the flow of the funds and reduced some of the requests to sort of balance out. Our private request for multi-year budget would have resulted in an increase in operating subsidy of about 9.35 million over the 4 years. And we will reduce that to 7 million with a significant change in sort of 2024. Just recognizing this budget's not going to be approved until late mid Q1. Just moving some of the expenses to, start in Q3 and Q4, and then following that same model when the next layer for adding additional resources in year 2, take a 6-month gap on that. I think just to spread that out, but and lets us to be thoughtful in how we implement these new funds and be realistic as well.
Great.
So I'm happy to take any questions on the total asks or any of the particulars of the multi-year budget.
All right, and my understanding is this was canvassed pretty fully at the finance committee. Am I right about that? All right, good. Any questions, comments? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
I'm just gonna say, having been at that finance committee meeting and having talked a lot there, I won't talk too much tonight unless questions get thrown my way. But I think that this is this reflects what the finance committee asked staff to consider. I think it's reasonable in terms of going forward with an ask through the multi-year budget. I don't know whether this one, this is the extra stuff that we'd like to do above and beyond our regular operations. So this will land in the city's multi-year budget process in one of 2 categories, either a staff recommended for consideration or an additional business case for consideration. At $7 million, I just think it's important for the board to be aware from a city council perspective, that represents a full 1% increase on property taxes. So if property taxes to maintain services are 4%, funding this extra ask would raise them to 5%. About $7 million is equivalent to about 1% of the overall mill rate increase that folks experience on their home property taxes. Obviously, housing is probably the key area of investment for everyone on council. I also think that the investment that is being suggested, the fact that it reflects community safety concerns in our LMCH properties is also consistent with the community safety and policing priorities that council has identified. So I think that this makes a lot of sense. And obviously the cleaners and custodians and the managers to oversee that program. We know very much from, I think all of us on the board, when we have received tenant concerns, cleanliness and maintenance of our buildings is a huge one. It is a huge one. And so I think that focusing in on that really is key to addressing some of our tenant needs. And then I'll just finally add the little bit that I shared at the finance committee near the end as well. While we're addressing these concerns, and while I recognize that there will still be concerns arising after this from our tenants, I think what's really important to recognize is that we're not operating on an island here. The city's going to be making investments in other areas, including additional police and community safety resources, including additional resources. Everybody, I'm sure, is well aware of the whole of community system response on the homelessness situation, the hubs for high acuity folks on the street, which means if they've got a place to go, they're not ending up in the basements or the laundry rooms or the vestibules of our building. So that's a positive thing, both from an operational perspective for us, but as well as for our tenants. So while we are asking for these investments are not going to stand alone in improving our operations and our tenants' experience. So I think these go hand in hand with what I think the majority of city council has identified as their priorities. So very supportive of this refined ask, and pacing matters. I very much I'm always mindful. I learned a lesson from a former city councilor who said to an LMCH board one time back in, I think, 2019, why haven't you spent the money that we gave you? Whether that former councilor is here tonight or not, I don't know, but I do recall him saying that at one point, and I think that the pacing that is suggested in this revised report makes a lot of sense, because there's no sense in asking for money we can't spend. And I think that this reflects the fact that we won't be able to even start spending until these business cases are approved. We can't roll the dice on expecting them all to be fully approved and start spending and then come up with a shortfall. So I think this is a very responsible approach.
I could say so much, but I'm not going to. I disagree with much of what you said. I'm sorry. But I have to focus on LMCH. But let me say this, I think London is going to run up against what so many other cities are running up against now. Taxpayers do not have the money to solve all the problems that people want to have solved. And I think that is going to become, and I'm fully aware of that because a lot of what I'm going to shut up now because I'm very much concerned about the directions we're going in. Let me just say that and leave it at that. So I just want to say I don't endorse what you said. I don't agree with much of it, and let's leave it at that. So anything further on this? All right, let's see if we can move and second it. Who's prepared to move it? Kara, seconded by Sean. All in favor? So we have 3 in favor, opposed. That would be me and John. So it's a 3-2 vote in favor. So that's passed. Staff report 2023-47, which is the 2022 rent increase guideline update. Andrea?
Yeah, through the chair. This is a report that the board would see on an annual basis from me. The province of Ontario releases their guideline for rent increases on an annual basis, and the direction for 2024 is that it will be the 2.5%. So I have written the report. I'm looking for approval from the board that we apply those to the market rental rates. Just to let you know that the overall impact on the tenants is probably, it's usually somewhere between 2 and 3% of our tenants that are actually at market rent. So that's the number that would be impacted by this. But the way that we roll the changes out, the increases are applied at the time of each household's annual review. So everybody is going to be aware of at least 90 days in advance that the rent increase is coming. But we also take direction from the service manager who wants all of the housing providers to apply this. So I'm seeking approval for the 2.5% increase tonight.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? All right. We need a mover and seconder. Moved by the deputy mayor, moved by Kara. All those in favor? That matter is passed. Next is staff report 2023-48, which is change order report for Limberlost paving. Go ahead. Anything to?
Thank you to the chair.
Yeah.
Essentially, we've entered into a contract with a contractor. They mobilized at the beginning of May to do all parking lots and roadways at our Limberlost family site. Within that contract, there was an allowance for expectation we were going to have to remove about 30% of the underground soils underneath the parking lots. And once we actually physically took the asphalt off, we realized that the sub base underneath the asphalt, we're going to have to take a lot more than 30%. So the report in front of you is asking for approval to accept change orders to replace. I don't know what the percentage is, but a significant amount more of the sub base to support the magical asphalt. With the new procurement policy, which was put into effect a few months ago, this would be over a 20% increase on the initial contract value. So that's why we come to speak today looking for approval to proceed with the accept the change orders contractor.
Okay.
They've been vetted by ourselves and our consultants to make sure that we're getting value for money. And then in fact, we do need to do this work to ensure the longevity of the parking lots.
Right. Any questions or comments? All right. Somebody prepared to move and second it. Moved by John, seconded by Councilor McAllister. All in favor? That matter is passed. Next is the tenant services committee reports for information. Just, I just want to, I'm gonna make a point that I'll build on later. This was a meeting that did not have quorum. It was rescheduled to a date where sufficient people for quorum agreed to attend. When we got there, it was just the chair of the committee, John, and myself. We could not proceed with the meeting, so this is coming directly to the board. There was about 5 staff members there and we couldn't proceed with the meeting. So I'll comment more on that later, but for now, we'll go through. I'll turn it over to John to introduce the report.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. I think, yeah, I mean, the reason this got pushed to tonight is because we didn't have quorum. So I'm sure everyone's had ample time to review the reports. There's a lot of great things being done. I mean, clearly there's a passionate group of people, working to improve, the quality and safety of the communities and make sure that tenants are enjoying their stays in their homes. So there's a lot of really wonderful things going on that I really just want to acknowledge that I see that, and I'm grateful for all of that. And I'll just leave it up to the crowd here if there's any questions on any of the reports or anything you've seen that stood out or that you're concerned about, or any comments.
All right, so maybe we'll just go to, I think if we can bundle them, does anyone have a problem with bundling them all together? We've had a chance to review them. No? Okay, so questions, comments from the board? All right, then just from my point of view, I just wanted to go to the TAC update. TAC is the Tenant Advisory Committee, and that I went to one of their meetings, and I just wanted maybe the staff could just let me know what is going on in that area, because I think we probably should be interested in how we're hearing from our tenants. This was set up, the TAC committee, to allow that to happen, but maybe we could get an update so that we can sort of see where we're going with that. Go ahead.
Thank
Thanks.
you through the chair. I haven't met everybody here, so I'll just quickly introduce myself.
It was a chance to introduce you too, so we get you started.
Lisa Luthra, I'm the community engagement manager. I've been with this organization for just under a year. So when I first started, I became engaged with TAC. And if you look through the report, it kind of outlines what the current state with TAC was, as well as some of the challenges that they face. And, it was an opportunity to really reflect in terms of the challenges that the group was having, as well as to take a step to be reflective. We do recognize that the voices of tenants are really important, but at the end of the day, the fundamental structure of TAC wasn't working. The tenant voices were getting lost. So we believe that through a review and revision of its systemic and foundational aspects, we'll be able to have a more effective and meaningful opportunity to conceptualize how tenant voices can be heard. In terms of an update, the last meeting with TAC was just in June. And it is the intent to be intentional, to take time to put thought in terms of the direction. So I haven't moved forward at this point, just in terms of timing with anything. But the next steps is really to do that groundwork, to do some research, see what's working in other municipalities, and kind of reflect and then be intentional about to move forward, and not to rush just to get something back out, but to kind of take it step by step to see what would work and what aligns with our organization.
Oh, thank you. So I think I went to the committee, and I think it's well-intentioned, but it was very, very difficult for me to see what their goals, plans were. They talked quite a bit about having a sort of input meetings from tenants. And I was trying to explain to them that we had sort of already done that. We didn't want to duplicate that. So I'm really interested going forward. I agree with you. I don't think it was working. I'm just wondering how do we do it going forward? So yeah, have a tenant voice, because we're going to have 2 tenant directors. Staff seems to be committed to having regular public meetings in buildings. I'm just curious, what what kind of structure would we look
Yeah.
at going
And
forward?
if I may, through the chair, that's a great question. I don't know what it's gonna look like, but I know what it's not gonna look like, and it's not gonna look the same. And I think to your point, we have to be mindful about areas of duplication and you know, where it makes sense and where does it make sense to be driving those voices from tenants, whether it's through here or whether through within the building. So some of that is to reflect as a whole as well, organizationally, what are we doing and where are we getting those voices? And do we need a tenant advisory committee, a council, or would it look a little bit different, right? So really some of that is just spending the time to be reflective and to say, you know, if this didn't work, how could it work? And how would it look differently? How would information flow? But to be mindful that we are not duplicating and we are doing it in a way that is reflective of how tenants want to engage with us and in terms of how they see it meaningful to bring forward their voices. So my team is doing some of that work with some of the community needs assessments that we're doing. We're doing community conversations. So we're getting out there and we're talking to tenants to say, like, what are the challenges you're facing? How do you want to be involved? You know, how do you see your community to be stronger? And through some of that, I don't want to make, I don't like to make promises I can't keep. I'm in no rush to be like, okay, January, I'm rolling out something new because I have to see how that's all going to come together. But I am committed to making sure that tenant voices are heard. And I think there's a variety of ways that we can do that.
Okay, I just want to thank you for that work, and I think you're astute to make the observations you're having. I think you're on the right track, and I think it's obviously a question of not duplicating, and there was talk about duplication and things like that. So thank you very much. I think you're really in the right direction. I look forward to what you might bring back and how we might do this. The only thing I would suggest is I think tenants love talking. They when I went to a meeting, they loved directly speaking to the CEO, for instance. They loved having a direct, I was there. They like to know that they're talking to people who are decision makers, I suppose. And I think that anything that can enhance that is good. I just felt with TAC that there was this intermediary step being placed that wasn't really may not be necessary. So thank you very much. John, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, you just made me think of something now through you, Chair. Maybe like coffee with the CAO or something like that, like little events like that, like a lunch and learn kind of thing, like once a month or once every couple months would be something that they'd be interested in. But I'm also thinking when the new tenant directors come, maybe there's a way to collaborate and just work together to think of, like, you know, ways to do some of the things you want to do. And just grateful that you're in the role and look forward to seeing what you do. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, John.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that we're revisiting how this happens too. I'm not a big fan of advisory committees at any level. I think that they often become committees that are bringing forward the voices of their own membership, not voices of the people that they're there to supposedly be representing, because they don't go out and do the engagement themselves before they come to a meeting. So I like the much more direct engagement. I like the town halls that I mean, I attended one at 632 Hale that staff were at. I think that that's a much more valuable route to tenant engagement. And to the point about having that face-to-face with the decision makers, I think advisory committees often become an extra layer of bureaucracy between the people we're trying to engage with and the decision makers themselves. So I'm not a fan of advisory committees, and if we can do it in a different way, I would much prefer to do it in a different way. So glad to hear that sort of track is where we're looking at how can we do things differently.
Thank you. Anything further on any of the reports? Mr. Corboy, you look like you want to.
Gonna say, Deputy Mayor, I wish City Council worked that way, but we'll have that conversation over coffee soon.
Oh, man.
I want to get rid of all the advisory committees there too.
I'm
So
the bad boy tonight, John. Don't try to take over from me. Anything further before we move and second and vote on this? Now we're voting on all the reports, just so we're aware. So they're just information reports. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So somebody prepared to move or second receive these for information. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Kara. who's doing her fair share. She's right in front of me, so I see her all the time. Anything further? All those in favor? That matter is passed. So we're now on to new business, and I had added the matter of quorum and meetings. And of course, the people I'm talking to are here, or not talking to are the people who I don't need to talk to are here. So first of all, I want to say for our elected representatives, I think your attendance is amazing. And we appreciate it. You make a real effort to come to meetings, but we are having quorum problems with committees and things like that. So what my intention is to speak to everyone where we're having issues and see what we can do. It doesn't help, obviously, that we were short a tenant member, but I just wanted to raise it as an issue. I can tell you that the people here, their attendance is good. So that's the challenge I have, but I am going to have to talk to some people and say, look, what's your ability to come to meetings and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to raise it so you would be aware of it. But again, from the point of view, I think the attendance of people who are elected, and I know how many responsibilities they have, I think it's been amazing. So I want to thank you for that. So that's all I had on that, just to make you aware of it. Moving forward, that we're going to have to do a little bit better job. So thank you very much. So without anything else, I'm moving adjournment. Somebody want to move it, second it? Deputy Mayor moves it. Carol second, all in favor. Thank you very much. I'll be in a better mood next time. I've got everything off my chest that I need to get off. Unless I get fired, I will be back next month. Thank you. Good night.
Would you like us to get you a cookie?
No, I feel great.
Thanks.
See you guys.
Thanks, Hadley.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Have a good night.